Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Nerd for No Reason podcast. I am one of your hosts, Mark,
I'm your other host, Raven.
and this week we have a very special guest, writer, artist, actor. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Chris Garret to the podcast. Woo!
Woo!
Clap, 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 snap
Yay.
fingers.
That's a very fancy intro. I've never been called before.
So, what's up, man? How have you been?
I've been good, man. Just living life, trying to stay busy. How about yourselves?
I, I'm doing fantastic. We've uh, got this podcast back up and running. You remember it from way back in the day when it was
Yeah.
turtlesdoit.com. I like
I was gonna
comics.
say, yeah, I was gonna say TDI. I didn't want to go into the whole Turtles Do It thing, but yes, I do remember, man. I'm super happy for you, and I'm happy for Raven. I'm glad to hear you guys are doing the podcast. I'm super excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's super fun. We have a good time every week chatting about, all the things we find that's fascinating throughout the week and talking about some really cool movies.
Right on. That sounds fantastic.
It is a kind of an intro for our listeners. Um, I mentioned let's start off with the writing aspect because I feel like if there was the one thing that would be the top of your many hobbies that you do, writing would probably be it. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, I think so. Writing comes to me naturally, so I think to make it a priority, even if it's not a priority at the moment, it will always kind of be one. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So
Did you
what? Go
go to
ahead.
school for writing? Or was it
No.
just like a thing that you were like, I'm gonna do this?
Yeah. Well, basically, writing is just it's a passion. Um, anything I've ever done, I've kind of just dove in if I liked it, and most about 99.9% of the time, I have no experience. I just kind of hit the ground running and just figure it out as it goes. So writing was something I loved doing growing up. And then one day I was like, you know what, I'm going to publish my work, and I just started researching and trying to get to do it. And from there, I just got really passionate about writing other things, pursuing other things with writing, and that's where I'm at.
And I,
Cool.
I think you kind of said what encapsulates like a great aspect of your writing is that you jump into it and figure it out. And with you being like this kind of indie writer, because I remember, and we can kind of touch on this a little bit later, is um, kind of not knowing what you're doing, but just going in and doing it anyway. And that's kind of a very punk rock kind of way to do it. And what was your earliest kind of inspirations from doing this? I kind of know the answer to this due to our history, but I also feel like this is kind of like intertwined with that last statement of I'm just going to get in there and do it.
Right. Well, I mean, to say it's punk rock. Basically, I grew up in a music scene. I've had music in my blood my entire life. My father was a drummer. He drummed in a lot of local bands. He's done some recording. I had a partake in that. I got to learn how to be a drummer, and I've done bands. I did tours. I did a lot of stuff. So I grew up in a music scene, and where basically you just have to kind of start from scratch. I love what I was seeing in music, and so I pursued it. I didn't know anything about it. I know I love bands, so I was reaching out to bands, and I was just getting to know people and telling them what I want to do, and I would just grab people that were in that field, and I would just learn. I would ask questions, and so the writing was the same thing. While I was doing the music thing, I love poetry, I love songwriting. Had no band, had no music, but I like to write. And so that's where I just started. I built a huge collection of just poetry and songs that never would be published or heard. And I was like, you know what, I really want to share this with people. So I just started looking up online, self-publishing, and I came through some stuff that wasn't so great, where they're like, hey, we're going to charge you a lot of money to publish your book, and we're going to put it in these places, and I couldn't afford that. So I kept on going, and I let it go for a couple of years, and then I came across things like self-publishing platforms like CreateSpace, but now it's Amazon's Kindle Publishing, and that's where I started. I looked into that, made my first book, and in between that, I would go to comic book conventions with my poetry. Kind of weird, right? And I had nothing to offer. I didn't know how to do art. My dad was a great artist. I was a terrible artist. My brother was a great artist. I was still a terrible artist. So I was going to these comic book conventions with poetry, but I learned a lot because I planted myself in that environment, and I just started asking questions. I reached out to other people beside me, publishers and writers and artists, and I'm like, hey, I'm trying to get into this field. Like, how do I do that? So I literally started with nothing, and I just started learning. And even now, I am no pro by no means, but I've learned to just do a project, learn my mistakes, and then do another project and get better at those mistakes.
Now
It's pretty cool.
I know that one of your things that you've done that I definitely think needs to make a comeback is at one time you were publishing or you were publishing just zines and for the uninitiated could you give us like a brief description of what zines are, especially
Yeah.
now we live in like this all digital world. But I find again the indie aspect of that just such an incredible fun thing.
Oh yeah, man, you're taking me way back. So yeah, zines are like basically miniature self-published books. They come in the form of, they can be comic books, they can be magazines, fanzines. It's basically it's an open market of things that were really big in, I think, the '80s. Now I'm not a zine historian, but I when I was first getting into it, punk rock, the indie rock scene, a lot of that people were doing zines. So I kind of thought, okay, I was like, let me start with that. But yeah, zines are like I said, they're just small pieces of media. People usually give them out, or they're really inexpensive. They're fun. I got away from it because I just don't have time to do it. I invested in all the things to do it. I'm like, you know what? I'm terrible at making books. Then I went to like Kinko's or like an Office Depot, and I'm like, hey, can you make this book for me for like sure for $5? I'm like, man, I can just get that published on Amazon for like $2. So I steered away from it, but yeah, those are basically what zines are. They're just like miniature books.
Yeah, and the thing that I really find so fascinating about the zine culture kind of as a whole is just the, and I mean this in the best sense of the term. I don't mean this as kind of a dig, but I mean like the kind of low rent factor that comes with it, because it could be anything from, you know, we got the glossy covers and all this, or it could just be like you said, we went to Kinko's or Office Depot and got some stuff copied and printed and stapled it together, and this is something we give out to get our work out. It was just it's such, again, I say this, but it was really just kind of in a punk rock world. Still feels like such a punk rock thing to do. So
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
how did you make the transition from poetry or you know non-comic things to writing comics? Because one of our mutual friends, you teamed up with him. I'll let you
Yep.
go ahead and tell that story about how you got into writing comics with JR.
Okay, cool. So basically, like what I was telling you about the comic book convention. So at the time, I didn't have like an actual published book on Amazon or anything yet, and all I had was my zines. That had I literally took some pictures of some things, and I photoshopped them. I threw my poetry on it. So I had some prints. They were just kind of, again, pretty indie, pretty punk rockish. So I went into the Warner Robins Comic Con, and I just started networking. I was like, hey, I'm not doing comics right now, but I'm trying to get into it. And I'll tell you, the first two people that actually got me inspired to do it and really were behind me, and I will say their names. They'll hate me for it, but it's actually the Pruitt brothers. So Joe Pruitt, who is involved with, he's done Marvel, he's done Aftershock Comics, he's written like X-Men, he's done all kinds of stuff, and his brother Jim Pruitt, who is big thing with Scout Comics, he too has done some big things with Marvel, DC, Dark Horse. These guys are writers, and they are huge staples in the comic book industry. And I was literally in like what I call the Pruitt sandwich, because I was like I was in the middle table, and one was on my left and one was on my right. And so we were just talking, and they were just the coolest guys. And I was like, man, I want to be a part of this, because they were really nice, really welcoming, made me feel good about the comic book industry that I love so much. So that was the first step. I got to talking to them. And then, at that same convention, JR was there with Chris Collins, and JR does a thing called Scary Tales. He's changed the name, he's rebranded, but Scary Tales is what I had first discovered prior to that convention. I heard about it, started reading it, loved it, talked to him. I was like, hey man, I'm really trying to do comics. I want to write. Can we possibly do something? Gave him some samples. He was digging it, and then I went ahead and I threw a pitch together. I got some. I did two scripts. I did one. I can't remember exactly. It was like one of his characters, and I kind of threw my own characters in to kind of counteract his. And then I think I did another script. I can't remember. It was like a couple. They're all revolved around his characters really, and he was like, "Man, this is great." And one of those scripts, it was like his character called Fubar. He's like an octopus chef. And I was like, man, wouldn't that be funny if his biggest fans of this comic book strip, this little strip I did, was like a bunch of sharks. And I was like, they can't be like regular sharks. So I was like, let's make them something funky, like Tim Burtonish, or you think of Calvin and Hobbes kind of stuff. So I was like, we're gonna be bucket sharks. And I had this whole idea. So I scripted out these sharks that are half a body. They live in these chum buckets, and they meet Fubar. They're the biggest fans of this octopus. So it's like a wolf being a big fan of like a chicken stinger. I don't know. It was just the irony in it. So I written it. I sent it off. I was like, the characters are disposable. There was no purpose for the sharks and the bucket sharks and stuff. But he read it. He's like, man, this is fantastic. He's like, can we do something with these sharks? I'm like, I don't know what you want to do with them, but I'm like, sure. And he was like, so he's sketching stuff up, and he draws like this full shark. I'm like, nah, man. I'm like, it's a bucket shark. He's like, what's a bucket shark? And then I throw this whole story of how they lost their lower body, and they roll around in these chum buckets, and they live in this town with his characters, and that was it. So we started the Finleys, which is a comic book we written together, and we put it all together. It's a whole world that we created. We got 2 issues, and sadly, that was it. We have 2 issues that are in the dark. They were written, but nothing was ever done with them.
That's great. Um, well, do you have is there any other comics that you've worked on besides the Finleys?
Yeah. So a couple years later, Finley's, we just kind of got away from it, and so I started doing a project with Kennedy Wynn. He was the guy I met at DragonCon 2018. I was in Artist Alley, and again, part of the reason was being there is to network and to see if I can get uh, anybody interested in working together. And so I came across Kennedy. I met a couple people, but Kennedy's the one that really stayed in contact. So, the thing with comic books that people don't realize that it's not one person. It's never one person. It's like a movie. Not one person can create a film. It takes a team. So with comic books, usually you got about 4 or 5, but in the indie world, 1 or 2. One person doing your storytelling, one person doing your writing, excuse me, and scripting, and the other person doing the art, and a lot of time collaborating together to figure it out. So with Kennedy was a fantastic artist, but he wasn't really good at storytelling. And he was like, hey, we should get together because I want to learn more about writing. And I'm like, all right, cool. I want to know more about art. So let's do this. So we had got together, and throughout a couple of years, we created this book. It was supposed to be an ongoing series called Dark Pines, but again, just like life, it was a side project, and we got away from it. But the cool thing is, before we really pulled apart on it, we did get together like almost like a mini story. So the first issue, it's like 16 to 20 pages, but we actually got a 9-page teaser published through Saturday Comics, and so it was approved through them, and they do crowdfunding to fund all their books. They're like a magazine. It's like Tales from the Crypt meets like famous monsters. So it's got interviews from like different actors and people in the horror business, and then it's got 2 or 3 comics that are thrown in there as well. So we got approved to be one of those comics. So it was a 9-page teaser. It's not out yet; still in development. So that is the next thing that I end up doing, and it's on hold. But overall, that's the last thing I've done in comics, and that was about 2 years ago.
Dude, that's super cool. I really like the inspiration of like, the horror comics and stuff like that. Are there any like comics that you're like super inspired by? Or like, like how Junji Ito does like his whole little horror thing and he made like a whole book of it and stuff like that. Is there anything like that that you're inspired by?
Oh yeah, like the thing with me, like I love. I'm a huge fan of. I love Spider Man. I'm not gonna lie. Like it doesn't really go into my comics, but I'm a huge Spider Man, and I'm not talking about like the newer stuff. I'm talking about like Stan Lee,
Hmm.
Steve Ditko, like probably first 16 issues kind of stuff. I love classic, like I guess golden and bronze age comics, silver, anything I think 80s and down were the bigger part of my inspiration as far as getting, starting my stories and making sure I leave people in suspense. Like uh, those comics inspire me a lot as far as the storytelling and the keep it pretty fun and action packed. Now, as far as like the darker stuff, I'd say like my biggest inspirations for those are things like I'll say horror comics. So Joe Hill, Lock and Key, fantastic. If you have not read the comic and you've seen the show, please give yourself a couple of hours and read the comic. Because I promise you, once you start on that on season on issue one,
Hmm.
it's nonstop and it gets you hooked. So Joe Hill is really my biggest inspiration as far as like writing horror thriller comics and anything just comics in general. Lock and Key was such an eye opener for me. I love the way he told stories. It was he kept you on edge. Um, Gabriel, I think it's Rodriguez, was the artist, and again, beautiful art, great storytelling on that piece. So I'd say Lock and Key is probably like my biggest inspiration for writing comics. Is anything I've done, even the darker stuff. It's usually, I like the flow that Joe Hill provided. So with the Finleys with Jr. It was more inspired, I'd say, with early Marvel stuff, and it was a combination of like Peanuts Gallery and um, I'd say Calvin and Hobbes, and then you combine comics that were like trying to think of the other inspirations, really just movies. Like we loved older zombie horror thrillers, so it was like Hitchcock and George Romero and things of that nature. Jaws, a lot of shark stuff. So that
Yeah.
was an influence for us as far as that book goes. But as far as my natural writing and what I love, it was more of the horror aspect. So Joe Hill, Stephen King, anything they've written, even non-comic form, those were really the big inspiration as far as like those comics goes as well.
Yeah, that's super cool. Did you ever like have any of your you said you were into music and stuff like that. Like did you have any of the like rock influence go into any of your comic writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always write with music, so a lot of the music that I listened to was more um, indie, hardcore, old school punk. I think a lot of the things I have on my soundtracks when I'm writing is usually stuff like Black Flag, Misfits, early stuff with Danzig, and then some of the Michael Graves stuff. Newer stuff like Census Fail, I'm a big emo screamo guy, so Finch, Census Fail, Newfound Glory, Saves Today. Those are kind of the bands that I listen to, not only with comics, but even going into the poetry. My first book, I've written a lot about too, like the, I guess, like the beats of those bands. So those are really the main like genres and bands that really influenced me and kind of kept my mind uh, focused when I'm writing comics.
Nice.
I want to circle back a little bit because you mentioned horror, and um, we're me and Raven both are big horror fans, but I've kind of
Oh yeah.
fallen out of it recently because I'm the only one in my house who really likes horror at the moment. So, Chris, I'm going to propose the question: what's some good horror movies that have come out recently
Okay,
that
man,
aren't just like schlocky gore fest?
right?
And not to
Not
say and not to say that I don't like campy like comedy
Oh, we
type.
love some camp. Yeah.
Right, but there is like this one thing where you're just gory for gory's sake without like any real substance or structure or anything like that. But like, what's some good
Right.
horror that's come out lately?
Okay, I don't know, man. Like, I really, people are probably gonna be against it, but I like Smile. I thought Smile was pretty darn good.
That's on my watch list.
Yeah, it was creative. Like, it's one of those, like, it doesn't really have a like a solid story, no crazy solid background to it, but it was like there was something going on, and it's like it was passed on from like one person to another person, kind of like you ever seen It Follows?
Yes.
Okay, so it's like It Follows, but
Hmm.
it's got to do with like whatever demon it gets into him, and it smiles and plays games and stuff. So it's very similar to like It Follows, in my opinion, which is why I like it, because It Follows is something that you really don't see movies and stories like that. So Smile was very similar in my opinion, and that's why I was digging it, because it had a background, it had an origin, but it's almost like you can literally do another movie based on that origin, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Okay.
So
Did
that's
you
one.
happen? Did you happen to watch The Menu that came out
I,
recently?
no, so that's on my list. I have not seen The Menu yet.
I think you should. It's so good. It's
I
incredibly written, and like all of the actors just play their part so phenomenally. I think you would really dig it.
I
I,
downloaded it today, and I'm gonna try to make some time this weekend to watch it because I've
Yes.
heard just because of you, Raven. So if it is not
Right.
good, I will air my grievances next week.
I'm sorry, Mark. You sound like you're still in like the '90s. Like, hey, I just downloaded this movie, brother. That'd be you, man.
No,
Uh, HBO Max, homie.
no, I'm like one step above like collecting digital media, or collecting like physical media. I um I like to have the downloaded thing, so either I can put it on my iPad or I can put it somewhere. Plus, I don't have all the streaming services, so
Right.
I will download it. I'll put it on my computer, and I figured out a way to stream from my computer to my TV in the living room.
Oh,
So
there you go.
so that works. That works real good for things that aren't on the streaming services we don't have. Plus, a lot of the
Sure.
streaming services don't have kind of like the weird stuff that I come across sometimes. I don't
Right.
think anyone has the Lost Boys. I just found there was speaking of horror movies, there was this horror director. I can't remember his name, but he directed this movie called Cannibal Holocaust back in the '80s, which
That
is
is.
a bonkers ass movie. But he did a few other movies, and I was like, oh well, let me go and see if I can find these, and I did. And I know I don't even have to look. I can guarantee you they're not on any HBO Max or Paramount Plus or whatever. So
Right.
I'm kind of at that point. But if it's on like Disney Plus or Netflix or something like that, then I don't typically download it because my subscription stays up to date on that.
Okay. That's fair. Understandable. So another one I watched. Again, it wasn't like super creepy, super like horror, but more like a gothic horror, and that was The Invitation. That was actually really good.
I did not watch that one.
Yeah, I haven't.
That was
I don't even think I've heard of that one.
it just came out, so I think it's on. I want to say maybe HBO Max or Netflix. I think it's on Netflix. So it looks
Hmm.
like I don't know. It looks like one of those like movies like Ready or Not, where they're all invited to this dinner party and they just start killing people. So the trailer kind of leads you into that, but
Oh, okay.
then it kind of coasts you into like this like horror, this like vampire horror love story, not like
Ooh.
Twilight, more like True Blood, a little more like Crimson Peak, if that makes sense. It's a good cross between True Blood and Crimson Peak.
Okay.
So
That sounds cool.
I don't really dig those kind of movies, but I like True Blood. Wasn't a fan of. I think it's maybe I'm saying it wrong. Crimson Peak with what's his name?
No,
Uh,
I know which one you're talking about. Yeah,
you know
it's
what I'm
Crimson
talking about,
Peak.
right? With Tom Hiddleston. So
What's his?
it's got Tom Hiddleston from
Yeah,
in Marvel fame and lore, but so yeah, it's kind of like Crimson Peak. In across with True Blood, it's a good movie. I really liked it. Not my thing usually, but I was digging it.
All right. Well, cool. That's some stuff I didn't even know Crimson Peak was a thing. I feel like, and it's got a bunch of people in it that I know and like, and I don't know why a vampire show uh, uh, flew under my radar with a bunch of actors that I like.
Well, the Crimson Peak isn't the movie I'm talking about. It's The Invitation. Crimson Peak does have Tom Hiddleston. The Invitation doesn't have a lot of people that are really famous, which is, again, it's part of like when I was watching it or watching the trailer. There's nobody that's really familiar in the movie, which is another reason it kind of intrigued me. It looked so good for the lack of famous actors in it, but it wasn't bad at all.
Yeah, but it's also directed by my favorite director, and that's Guillermo del Toro. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
he is. I think pound for pound, like the most creative visually, from a writer standpoint. I think that he is the best there is out there, because you can look at a movie and be like, okay, I know this style,
right.
and even the tone and everything else. Like, it is definitely, you can pinpoint it, and it is for sure. Like, that's the guy that I would love to, given a chance to meet a famous person, that would be the guy that I would want to sit there and pick his brain for an hour and just talk
Yeah,
shop.
fair enough. Yeah, so he's fantastic. I agree.
So, all right. So let's. I want to talk. I want to talk about acting with you,
Okay.
Chris, because this is the thing that there's so much here in Georgia. There's so many acting things going on, especially around where we live here in Central Georgia, but also up in Atlanta. And I know that you've done some some acting with some mutual acquaintances of ours,
Right.
and you told me recently, when I reached out to you for this interview, that you were also in this movie, this other movie called The Marks, that I guess is kind of doing the touring around and doing some stuff. How did you make the segue, or how did you get into acting from writing and all this other stuff that you do?
All right. All right. So I gotta tell you, I'm definitely not an actor. I got lucky. I've had several opportunities to do acting, like basically just stand-ins and be an extra. My first quote unquote opportunity. It almost happened, but because my work schedule, it didn't. I actually got an email back from the casting call for The Crazies, and they were filming that literally right down the street. I lived in Byron at the time. They were filming at Fort Valley. So if you're not familiar with The Crazies, it's a George A. Romero film that they remade in around like 2009 or 10. It had Timothy Oliphant and a bunch of other people in it. So that was the first time I emailed them. I'm like, hey, I was mentioned to be an extra. They're like, oh, great. What's your schedule? And I guess when I told them that, they ghosted me. Then I found out it's like, 12, 13-hour days. So when I'm going to work, they're literally like wrapping up. So I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So, years and years later, I always thought about the idea of doing it, and I always see these casting calls. So a friend of mine named Joseph Lavender has been doing indie films for a while. We actually, we knew each other, or we know of each other from back in our music days. He was in a band called Nor Am I, and he was one of the singers, and he left that and just kind of did wrestling. He was an indie wrestler for a little bit, and then he started doing like Ghostbuster things. He's big into Ghostbusters, and we kind of reconnected over Ghostbusters, dressing up, going to Dragon Con, seeing each other, staying in touch through social media, and so he's been doing some stuff, and he was working on a project. He loves wrestling, so it's a movie about '90s wrestling, kind of like it's like backyard wrestling, and it's got the story of like this girl that is like the main star of this backyard wrestling, and the main character is like this big time wrestler that's now like kind of washed up. It's kind of like the movie The Wrestler in a way. It's kind of like Mickey Rourke's character, where he is an old Wall Street wrestler. He's like in the Indies, and he's doing conventions and things like that. So her dad is this former has been, and so they one of her friends basically try to pull him in, and they end up having like a match together. I don't know the whole story. It's been a while since they even did this movie. So as Joseph was talking about this movie, and he's filming it, Everything has gone through. I think it was like crowdfunding, and he's asked around for all these different places to film. So one of them, he was filming at the this wrestling like this flea market. It's like in Fort Valley. If you ever doing wrestling shows, and they have a ring, and it's like literally built for like indie wrestling. So he's like, hey, we're gonna be doing this over here. Is anywhere everyone come? I'm like, yeah, it's like 20-minute drive. So, I told him I can't go for all of it, but I went for like one day. So I was there for like, I don't know, maybe 10 hours. I sound like they're on verge of NDA. And I go in there, and basically my main thing was to be a heckler. So I'm in the crowd, and it was like maybe like an hour out of like 8 hours that we were actually doing the scenes. So we'd be waiting in the back, and they would be filming other parts of the movie. And so, they have like catering, and I say this loosely because I walked in. They've been filming for like probably 10 hours when I walked in. So all the food's like already rummaged through. It's like 30 degrees in February. There's like hot dogs in a crock pot. For like soggy water. I'm so hungry and I'm so cold. I'm like, cool. This is good. This is good for me. I've had worse. So, I might munch on these like soggy hot dogs and Slim Jims, and we're just waiting for us to come out and actually play our part to be hecklers and extras. So, we go back there for a little bit. They take us out. We sit down. They give us like popcorn and props and things of that nature. And so they give us direction on who to boo and who to heckle. So that was cool.
Man,
Sounds like a good time.
that sounds like so much fun.
It was. I'll tell you that it was really fun because like just behind the scenes, we got to talk to a lot of people. There was like a guy that came from like Tennessee, literally just to be in this movie because he had a friend that was in the film. And what was even cooler is so the scenes we were filming, like the main character who was played by I think is Joe Thurman. Joe Thurman's a legit retired wrestler. He was in WCW back in the '90s. He was known for basically like he wrestled Vader and got his back broke. So he has a little bit of like fame from that, and then he's been doing like movies since. So Joe Thurman's not even supposed to be in the movie, but he showed up to be an extra. So we get to hang out with like a former WCW wrestler, and we're in this like old indie wrestling venue. And the cool part is, as we're in the back, like there's like a wall of like people just signing stuff. And I'm talking to this guy named Jeremy. He's from Tennessee. We're talking about wrestling, and I'm looking through his wall, and I'm like, holy shnikes! I don't want to say the other word, but I'm like, that's Scott Hall's autograph. So Scott Hall was there, and he signed the wall. It's pretty rad.
That's cool. Speaking of wrestling, dude, we got to talk WWF for just a little bit because I know for a fact that you're into wrestling.
Right.
WWE getting sold or potentially getting sold. It's all
Oh,
like the worst kept secret in wrestling right now.
yeah, it's pretty terrible.
I guess for $8 billion to a Saudi prince.
Yeah, from what I heard, it was confirmed that it's not happening, and that I think it was a rumor. I think it was an idea because like I saw that, and then I think like the next day WWE if I put out a statement, they're like, yeah, we're still in negotiations. So I think it was something that touched. Because did you also hear that WWE almost got sold to Disney? So
Oh, geez.
Oh my gosh.
yeah, like supposedly Disney was interested. They said NBC was interested. They said Saudi was interested, so they're still tossing around. But did you hear that Stephanie McMahon, like literally when her dad came back, like first, the reason why they're in turmoil, if you go back, Vince got in some really some bad stuff, like
Yeah.
a lot of accusations. So he left. So when he left, Tony Khan from AEW and Stephanie McMahon were co-CEOs of WWE, and Triple H was all in charge of development and everything else. Well, apparently, when Vince came back and he basically was swinging around, his stick, he was like, you're not going to make any moves without me. He goes back to be executive, in charge, and he makes all the calls. And basically, I think after that, Stephanie McMahon stepped down. She resigned, like literally within hours.
Well, from what I understand, and I've followed it a little bit off and on over the years because me and my oldest daughter have kind of gotten back into it recently. But the storylines or the arcs and whatever that Triple H has done, because there was a point a couple years ago where he was in charge of development and things were going good, and then Vince McMahon stepped in and kind of removed him from that position. But it seems like Triple H has a really good kind of eye, really good sense of like what the stories need to be to kind of get that little bit more traction. Where Vince, I give credit where credit's due because he is the Vince McMahon, the CEO of the WWE, but also at the same time, like he's also at that age where I think that this should be more of like Triple H's wheelhouse, where he's kind of got that sense of what's going to hit and what's not going to hit. And it seemed like during that time he was gone, it was really picking up steam and things were going good again. With the WWE potentially being sold, does the company still on chug along as normal with all of its SmackDown and NXTs and the main line, or do we get a change there? And additionally, does Stephanie McMahon and Triple H go to a rival organization and take them over and make it everything that we wish the WWE would be? Chris, go.
I think that's a lot of pressure, a lot of conversation. Okay, so I think it's a family business. So even if you sell it, I think somebody's still gonna be involved. I mean, take Disney for example. Down the line, Disney has had some relative or somebody, aunt, great uncle, whoever related to Walt has had some partake in that company. So I feel like WWE is the same way. Like you said, Vince. I mean, wrestling's been around way before Vince, but Vince really he created the sports entertainment, the television, the merch, basically the show aspect of wrestling. So I think even if they're going to sell it, I think they're going to sell it to a company that would take care of it. I think if they're going to do anything like that, they're going to make sure they have core people that are going to be behind it. I feel like they're not going to make I hate to say TNT, but a TNT TBS kind of situation where they're giving this huge accomplishment of a wrestling company or sports entertainment company to somebody who's not going to run it properly and run it to the ground. They were able to take brands and to give them life again because they are so good at what they do. So I think if they're going to sell, they're going to sell to somebody that has an equal opportunity or has a passion for it to let it continue to grow and not run it to the ground. With that being said, as far as Triple H, I think even if they sold that company, man, that's still the major leagues for wrestling. So no matter who takes it on after Vince McMahon, I think Triple H and Stephanie, I think they all have a hand in it. I think even by legality and just by her blood, I think Stephanie McMahon will not just go off to another promotion because the reason why she's in the industry is because of her father and because of WWE. So I feel like everybody will still be involved in some point. I don't think everybody would be on television or really hands in the creative aspect, but I think they'll still be there maybe as a consultant or something along those lines, somewhere behind the scenes, if that makes sense.
All right. Well, Raven, are you a fan of wrestling? I don't think we've ever talked about wrestling.
I don't follow wrestling.
Okay.
The most that I know about wrestling is whatever stupid stuff that Chris goes, "Hey, this is really dumb. You should watch this," and I'm like, "Okay." That's the most of my knowledge.
I was trying to explain to Alice, my oldest, about we were watching some old clips or something, and she was commenting on the finishers of the legends. We'll call them the legends, like the 80s and 90s crew. Like Hulk Hogan's finishing move was just a leg drop. That's all it was. And she was like, someone did like a body slam off the top rope or something. She's like, that's his finisher? I'm like, oh, you are so spoiled.
Right.
In a world of the people's elbow and everything else, just
Man, not even that though. Like there's people now are like doing like they're like coming off the top rope doing like an RKO in the ring.
oh
It's got like, more advanced than like in the people's elbow.
yeah, we watch the NXT because that's who's got our favorite wrestler, who is Austin Creed, by the way.
Nice.
New Day. Yeah, we kind of got back into wrestling as a whole because of him, because he was on the relaunched G4,
Right.
RIP, and he was such a good cast member on that we were like, we got to check him out on this. And then we kind of fell in love with the New Day all over again, and but watching, because now he's with NXT.
Yeah.
Those guys, I know that's kind of like their minor leagues, but man, they got a bunch of really good talent over in NXT.
You know what's so funny about that? Did you know Austin Creed or Xavier Woods, he wrestled in One Robins for like a year or two?
I heard that because I found out he was from Columbus, and I was listening to a podcast interview with him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I wrestled all around the state." And I'm like, I know he had to have wrestled in Warner Robins.
Yeah. So
Hey.
when Johnny G's was a thing, Johnny Gayton he loved wrestling, so he had like this whole like Rampage Pro Wrestling thing. And funny enough, he would, instead of paying wrestlers for appearances and for signings and and wrestling, the bigger guys, he would actually give them like free eye surgery.
Oh shit! Okay, yeah, I guess that would work.
So on top of that, he brought like Dallas Page, Jim Hacksaw. Jake the St. Robert. Like, he brought like huge legends to sign autographs, and literally in exchange for eye surgery. But he was running a legit like independent wrestling promotion. And when Austin Creed had left TNA or Impact, he signed on with Rampage for like a couple years.
Wow. Oh, and Raven, to give you Raven and our listeners here, to give you guys a little bit of context about who Johnny Gayton was. Johnny Gayton is a local eye surgeon or optometrist here in town. And he had his hands in a couple different businesses. And one of them was kind of like this, what's the best way to put it? It was called Johnny G's, and
like
it was
Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, it was Chuck E. Cheese. That's a perfect example without the animatronics, but it had it was a place where you could go and have a birthday party and things like that. And he ran an independent wrestling thing, but his commercials were hilarious because he was also like this power lifter too, and he would be like, "Oh, I power lifted, I'm tough," and he had wrestlers in his commercials. It was almost like like an old car salesman, and yeah, he would do eye surgeries during the week and then go body slam people on the weekends. And
Bro, what?
Yeah.
That's insane. Also, the way that I took that was basically a kid's Chuck E. Cheese mashed with Fight Club.
You know?
Which would honestly be hilarious.
And I don't know why I just I think just because I said car salesman. Chris, you might know this because you're from the local area. And anyone who's out there, Raven, I recommend that you go look this up. Do you remember the old Dusty Rhodes, Tom Stymie Ford commercials from way back when we were kids? Those are some of my absolute, I don't know why I remember this so much vividly to this day, but the Dusty Rhodes would come down here and do a car commercial for a local dealership around here. And it was the wildest thing because he'd get on this, start slapping hoods and run around and be like, "Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and I'm Tom Diamond Ford, known all over the world. I was in Tokyo, Japan. A little Japanese man came up to me and said, he said, Dream, where'd you get that Ford from? He said, Tom Diamond Ford in Fort Valley, Georgia. And it's absurd.
That is really good, by the way.
Thank you. But it's so absurd watching these old commercials. And I don't even know if Tom Stymie Ford is still around. Tom Stymus. Is it Stymus?
I don't know.
But it's like one of those things, like if you're from this area of the age of me and Chris are, you know what it is. And it was just the wildest thing to see at the time. Dusty Rhodes was probably at his height in our little local car market, slapping Ford Lincoln hoods.
That's true. That's true.
All right, well, you guys ready to talk about some Ghostbusters?
Yeah, let's do it for sure.
All right. So this week we let Chris pick out the movie because he is our very special guest this week, and you chose Ghostbusters Afterlife, which is curious for a couple reasons, I think, because you have a relationship with the Ghostbusters community. Uh,
Yep.
how did you get involved with the Ghostbusters community? Because out of all the fandoms that I've interacted with over the years, the Ghostbuster one seems like the most fun besides the heavy metal fandom.
I feel like all right. So Ghostbusters fandom, like I love. There's so many things that I'm really a big fan of. I love Star Wars. I love Ghostbusters. But I feel like Ghostbusters is like the Bad News Bears of the franchises when it comes to their fandom. And I say that because if you look into Star Wars, so it's like to be a part of like their 501st and all that stuff. I was like, man, I would love to do be a stormtrooper and be a part of that and go to hospitals and fundraisers. But man, let me tell you, so you literally have to have a screen accurate costume. I don't remember for sure. Don't quote me on this, but I think there's like you have to pay dues to get in.
Mm-hmm.
It's all part of like Disney and Lucasfilm. Like literally, it's a part of what they do. So when Lucasfilms does events, they will literally pull people out of like the 501st to be a part of it, whether it's like a parade or like a Make a Wish situation. So it's like literally the 501st is tied with Lucas, and they are very strict about how they look. So it's like if you like, they have a list I'm not even kidding. If you go to their website, you go to their website. There's a list of stuff you have to have on your costume, and if you're not checking off everything, you cannot be a part of the 501st officially. So it's strict, and I thought about that. I was like, that's cool, but I've always loved Ghostbusters. As a kid, sitting there in the dark, watching the scene with Stay Puft as like walking by, they're like, "What did you do, Ray?" And you see, you hear the thumping, and then that scene where Stay Puft's head's like going past the water tower. That captured me, man, and I've always bounced back to Ghostbusters as a movie I love. I've watched one and two. I've watched the TV series. That was a huge part of my childhood. So getting older, I was like, I want to be a part of that because I've seen documentaries and I saw videos of Ghostbusters going to hospitals, children's hospitals, and fundraisers and doing good in their communities and being so attached. So me finding out there's a Georgia Ghostbusters, I kind of talked to them and just I always liked the idea of it. So I finally said in 2017, like, you know what, I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to afford a proton pack because at the time they didn't have anything through Spirit Halloween. So everything you had to build on your own or pay somebody, and you're talking about $800 to $1,000, minimum.
Oof.
So I was like, well, this is gonna be very hard to do. But then I got to looking at there's people making like cardboard version of the proton pack. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna start investing in a suit. So I was like, I'm gonna start getting a flight suit first, and then I'll start buying patches, and then the belt. I just kind of went just step to step. But funny enough, when I started doing it in 2017, just building my suit, that's where I think New York, no, not New York Comic Con, San Diego, Spirit was like, "Hey, we're putting out a proton pack," and I'm like, "Oh, well, there's my pack." And then they're like, "We're putting out a trap." I'm like, "Great!" So I got a lot of my stuff from Spirit Halloween, and then I went to the internet and I modded it. But what really got me started, as far as on the right track to be in the Ghostbuster community, I knew people that were already in it, like Chase Ambrose, Hal Clay. These guys were established Ghostbuster fans in Georgia for years, like 10, 20 years. So I reached out to them. I knew them through doing conventions. I'm like, hey, I really want to do this. So they got me my Georgia patch and things like that. So I started piecing my piece of my suit together. I reached out to these guys that have been in the group or been doing the Ghostbuster cosplay for years. And they just kind of give me a couple things, a couple of links to go to, a couple sites to buy from. And that's how I started building the pack. And over the years, I just started adding more to it or getting more detailed with the Spirit pack, not really buying a new one or anything.
That's awesome. So, with this week's movie, Ghostbusters Afterlife, uh, I always propose this question to Raven, and Chris. I figured that this is your jam because you suggested it. So I will continue with the tradition. Raven, what did you think of this movie?
I vaguely remember after watching it for the first time, texting you and instantly being like, "Have you seen the new Ghostbusters?" To which you and I got on a call and we were like, "This was so good." Blah 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 blah. Like I went with Chris and like some of our friends, and the entire time I had like just a smile on my face because I was so excited about the fact that like I like the fact that they're using like a lot of um you know things that were in the past movies that you're obviously like, oh, I see that, I see this, I see little things like that. And I also really love the special effects that they didn't look, you know, super over the top, but they still had a little bit of like that original feel to them.
Right,
If you
right.
know
I
what I
agree.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah, the part of this movie where I think it really shines is everything feels the same way it did in the original movies. Um, there's there's just that same kind of essence and overall just kind of, I don't know. It's a comedy, but it's a slightly horror, like, I don't want to say horror, but sci-fi, and but it has like these little elements, and it's has CGI, but not really. Like a lot of it is practical effects, and it's really good. Like you can tell that, like when the scene when the what when they open the trap for the first time, and the dog runs running through them buses and burst out all them windows, you know that that's a practical effect. You can see the
Right.
glass physically on the ground and shattering around the actors. I'm sure it's just candy glass, but you know 5 years ago that would have been an entirely CGI'd explosion fest.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
uh
I think like what you said, how it's got a little bit of everything. So for me, I feel like a part of the reason why it's so good. I don't know if you know the background of that. Jason Ivan Reitman's son, Jason Reitman, had got together with a guy that written the movie Monster House, and so they pitched that to Ivan for this movie. So with Jason being, he was in Ghostbusters too. He's been in Ghostbusters all his life. His dad literally, that's all they've really done. So him taking that role as director, I think it was a big part of it because he knew the franchise, he knew what fans wanted, and that was a big thing. I think a lot of people kind of disliked the 2016 because it was coming from someone that was a fan, but not invested like the Reitmans. You know what I mean? So that to me is, I think, why it touched on so many levels. It was emotionally great. It was dramatic. It was funny. It was scary. It was everything you experienced in the first movie, because people that are working on this film were very in love with it. It is very passionate. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the absolute superstar of this movie, um who
It's Moncher.
what's that?
Moncher. He's the superstar. That's better.
Absolutely.
uh, well, um as much as I love podcast and Gary Gruberman, but no, McKenna Grace is the absolute bona fide star of this movie. The
Absolutely.
She's
the
such a good actress.
she the entire time I watched this movie, both this week and when I first time I saw it, I was just enthralled by this young lady. Just she captivated me in a way that an actress hasn't done. I believed 100% that she was the character she was playing
And
in real
she was
life.
like, she was like 12 years old.
Yeah.
That was so wild to me that she was such a good actress at that age.
And
Oh
I
yeah.
it
No. She was also doing like back to back different like movies too. So the
That too.
fact that she could just like fully immerse herself in like this role and just act her little butt off.
mhm.
Right. I agree.
And podcast is another one of those characters that I feel like he was reaching, that he was supposed to be someone specific, in the the writer was like, okay, I'm gonna make this character for all of these
Listeners
people.
like us, like
Yeah,
people who our
yeah.
podcast.
I'm probably gonna say that it was probably the Yes Have Some crew, just
Yes.
a, just a
Oh God.
a
Yes.
hypothesis here,
Yeah.
but of course, an amplified version. Those guys are great. They put on a great show.
Did
Um,
you? Real quick, did you see the interview? Did you hear or see the interview they did with Logan Kim? We played podcast.
yes, I saw.
So
I watched part of it. I watched
that
about half of it, and then I got
right.
distracted and had to turn it off. So, and
Yeah.
they
That,
just did one a couple months ago with McKenna Grace too.
they did. I don't know. I personally, I thought the Logan Kim one went really smooth. That kid knows how to talk. Like he's really good about it.
And it's wild because they did that Logan Kim interview relatively close to the release of the movie, and those kids have grown up so much since they shot that movie. I almost didn't recognize them.
Right. Was it? Was it 2 years ago? I think 2 years. They filmed. They started filming in 2018.
Yeah,
It was
Yeah.
supposed to be 2019. But it didn't even come out until 2020.
21.
21? Yeah.
21.
Yeah,
It was supposed to come out in 2020,
Yep.
which, there's the little scene where Gruberman's over in the store and like you see like
Yeah.
he's
The
getting
mini
Baskin Robbins ice cream. I was actually working at Baskin Robbins and we had like an entire thing we were supposed to do. Like we were supposed to be wearing shirts. We had ice cream that was literally like slime
Yeah, you have to like
flavored something.
move
Yeah,
yourself.
summertime slime.
Yep.
And like it was like a whole thing. And then they ended up having to push it back due to like I think it had to do something with COVID, but I'm not fully sure.
Yeah,
And like they just didn't get it all done.
they pushed it back like 3 or 4 times. It's supposed to be like in like July of 2020.
All
And
right.
then they
Yeah.
pushed it to like November, and then it went like I don't know. It moved like 3 or 4 times, and every time I was like, man, I was like, this sucks because we were like, me and our group, we were anticipating, we were excited about it, and so every time we got closer, then they pushed it back again. So it was a fight, but yeah, I think it was like 2 years later we finally released it.
yeah. At one point, I actually thought it was canceled because I remember seeing the trailer so early on, and I was like, man, this thing should be out by now. And then when they finally watched it by the end of the movie, I'm sitting there crying like an idiot in the back of the theater. Like, how dare you get me in my feelings in a Ghostbusters movie?
Oh yeah, no, that ending, man, that was a real kick right in the gut.
And I do have to give like it's really hard to do for one a legacy project like this because
Yes.
bring everyone back, and especially when you have one of the most memorable guys now gone.
Right.
How do we tackle that obstacle? And I think that they did it probably the best way that they could have done it.
Yeah.
You know, and if Egon wouldn't have been a ghost in some way, shape, form, or fashion in this movie, then I think the fans would have rioted.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job doing a CGI version, and not really of Harold Ramis, but of Egon, because Harold Ramis was a little more on the heavier side before he passed. But they got with the Ramis family, and they started playing around with the Egon character from GB 1 and 2, and they created this Egon that is relatively looks like the one we remember. It with Harold Ramis's likeness, but it was nice, and it really came together at the end. I liked the build up to it where you didn't see him, but that last bit where he's standing right there with Ernie Hudson and Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd. Man, I'm getting teary eyed just thinking about it because it's such a wonderful scene, and it's super cool. They did a really good job with it.
Yeah, I really just wish there's just a few like kind of loose ends that they kind of touch on that they never really explore, and it kind of upsets me because I want to know more. Like I want to know who Carrie Coon's mother is.
Right.
Because and at what point did Egon leave? Because it seems like he left very early in
Yeah.
her life. Um, So who was her mother? Um, uh, uh, what was the other thing? The I kind of would have liked to see. Well, I know we couldn't have done it, and this is just me being nitpicky at this point because, for the most part, I really enjoyed the hell out of this movie. Um, I really would have loved to see the the fallout between the original Ghostbusters. How they kind of went their separate ways and that kind of thing. But I know we can't do that because just wishful thinking. Ray gave a really good explanation as a way to catch everybody up.
Right. Well,
So
I mean, well, here's the thing. Like me being the huge nerd I am, so believe it or not, there's a lot of that they announced in Ghostbusters Day last year. So here's the thing: all the stuff that was in between GB2 and Afterlife, they're doing a Dark Horse series of the
Oh,
comic. So you're going to be
oh,
able
that's
to
great.
get that story. They're going to do it through comics. And then right now, I believe they're filming Afterlife Part 2 in like
Yes.
March. And Ernie Hudson's returning, Phoebe or McKenna Grace returning, Logan Killen's returning. So I really think there's an opportunity in between different movies, other sources of media, comics, books, whatever. They're going to probably tell those stories. Just like I don't know, I joke around when I say this, but Afterlife was like the Force Awakens of the Ghostbusters franchise. Like they literally brought the most important stuff out of like the franchises from the first movie, second movie, and they put it in Afterlife. So I think they're going to still tug those heartstrings through comic books and through the sequels and even an animated movie they're doing with Netflix, from what I've heard. So you'll be able to see a lot of that, I think, coming up in the next couple of years.
Mhm. Another issue I had, um, and I guess the Force Awakens is kind of a good parallel to draw to this, where they just took took the best of what they had. I
Right.
wish they wouldn't have used the same villain that they used in the original Ghostbusters. I
Really?
get,
No Gozer?
I like it. I like it, but at the same time, I kind of wish they would have done if they would have done like Gozer's cousin or something else, like I
no,
feel
get
like they
out of
could have
here.
tied it back
Come
to
on.
Gozer,
Absolutely
but
not.
not
Look,
actually Gozer.
yeah, I don't know. So here's my thing. I feel like I don't think it was really Gozer, the main villain. I really think in this movie it was Ivan Shandor because they focus on the town he built
Yeah,
to welcome Gozer. So Gozer had a small part in it, but I think it was more based around Ivan Shandor because the whole town they were in is the reason why Egon flocked over there. He realized from everything from the first movie that there is more to Ivan Shandor and what he was creating, and it was not just in New York; it was other things. So I think he tracked it down, and that's where uh, we kind of find out. Okay, it's all Ivan Chandler comes in. J.K. Simmons is that character,
and
and I feel like
how are you gonna have J.K. Simmons in your movie for 30 seconds and then kill
right,
him? That is J.K. He is a national treasure.
right,
He
and
wants his
kills
pictures of
Son of
Spider Man.
right. I agree. Well, I think a lot of it because I think J.K. Simmons does a lot of Jason Reitman's movies, so I think that was just kind of like his thing. How Bill Murray's in like a lot of Ivan Reitman movies. He's in Space Jam. He's in
Yeah.
like all those other films he's done. So I just thought it was funny, that they brought him in. But I really felt like the villain in this movie was more of Ivan Shandor because it was in a town that he built.
Okay, I can get on board with that.
You know. So, all right. So I got to tell you the story. So before we step anywhere else. So you mentioned the ending of this movie, the legacy characters, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to start with this right now. I have a piece of production used equipment on my proton pack from the movie.
Ooh.
Really?
Yeah. So okay. So two guys I know that I've been doing the Ghostbuster thing with is Charles Fincher and Hal Clay. So Charles Fincher and Hal are both they do different things and nerd stuff. Fincher literally he makes ribbon cables, which is the little rainbow ribbon that goes in the back of a proton pack. He makes Ghostbuster one replicas and he sells them online, and he's done really cool things with that. Like he had he had he built packs of stuff. But anyway, Charles has literally lent his packs and his equipment He's been consultant for like Supernatural when those guys were doing like a Ghostbusters mashup. Charles has done things for that. Hal's been involved in other movies. So to get to where my point is, for this movie, they asked Charles Fincher to create the ribbon cables or to send over ribbon cables to put on the proton pack for Phoebe, because the one she used was a Ghostbuster 1 proton pack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, so when the boys came in at the very end, um, they were using Ghostbuster 2 proton packs. All right. So when I first started and I was grabbing pieces for my pack, Hal Clay was like, "Hey," I was like, "You know where I can get ribbon cables? I don't want to pay $65 for a Fincher cable." And he's like, "I got like a whole roll somebody gave me of the GB2." He's like, "Yeah, I'll give you some." I was like, "Cool." So he gave me like a nice party like length of this ribbon cable. So it's to this day it's on my pack, and I've had it. So come to find out, after he cut me a slice of this, he also cut out like 3 more slices for Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Ernie Hudson for the Afterlife movie.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
that's so
cool.
cool.
So I literally have I have a production used piece because it literally came from the same role he gave to those guys.
That's
So that's something you like brag about to people whenever you have it, right?
Yes, and the best part, it was free, so I can even brag harder.
that's the way to do it, man. No, brag on it, man. I got my collectibles I brag on. So
But I can afford half the stuff, so the fact I was like, man, I should buy a ribbon Charles Fincher cable because it was used in the movie. Then come to find out, I have one not only used in the movie, but literally the same cable that was used for the main actors. So I was like, that's awesome.
really up and down. I enjoyed the hell out of this movie. Even watching it again this time, I felt like there was no diminished value in watching this movie.
I agree.
And my youngest wants to watch it again this weekend, so I got a feeling I'm going to end up watching it again.
There you
Um,
go.
so, and I'm not upset by that. And I think that that probably says more about this movie than anything else we could possibly say.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I agree.
So, all right. Well, is there any other things y'all want to talk about in Ghostbusters Afterlife before we talk about what's made us happy this week?
Okay. I well, I can say for me, Afterlife, it struck the same way as the first one, and I think for me, Afterlife was a lot more personal because at this point, so when I started doing the Ghostbuster thing, the franchising, the Georgia Ghostbusters really hasn't done much. So we were trying to do things off and on before Afterlife came out. But the cool thing is when Afterlife came out, it kind of brought us together. So the first time I got to see this movie was I saw it literally one of our members had paid for an entire theater and literally just invited all the members of the Georgia Ghostbusters to watch a personal private screening with no one but just the Ghostbusters at in Macon at M-Star
Oh,
actually.
that's so cool.
And again, and the guy did it just out of the pure love of the franchise and his friends. He was like, "Hey, he's like, nobody, don't put any money into this." He's like, I'm paying for this because I love you guys and I want us to be together to watch this." So the theater actually even cut us a sweeter deal. So not only did our friend pay for this for us to get together and watch it on the opening night, they invited us to come out and just hang out with with other moviegoers for the movie. And the sweetest part of it was like they gave us like free popcorn and candy um, just for hanging out and talking to other moviegoers.
Oh, that's such a fun time. Like
It was
that's such a good way to experience it.
it was, and the cool part is like so we are all like they won't let us bring proton packs in for their weapon policy, but I brought like a whole table of like
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
like no, no kidding. But I mean, we had to respect it. So everybody showed up. But the cool thing is that I took like everything off my collector shelf, and I have like, I mean, I've got this cute little like picture frame. It says "I heart my dog," and it's got a terror dog on it from the first movie.
Oh,
And I have like I've got like replicas of the Stay Puft marshmallows. I have so many props and stuff. So I brought a lot of that, and so we set up a table. We were all in uniform, so kids were coming up and taking pictures. Older fans were coming up taking pictures. So we had a good time before the movie started. But when we got in there, it hit us hard because this is something that us as fans and members of our group were looking forward to. We did this as a passion, so I felt like Afterlife kind of fueled that for us again. it made us it gave us reason to keep going. Even though the 2016 movie was fantastic, don't get me wrong, not everybody was on board with it, but with this movie, if you're at the bottom, to me, the bottom line of the movie was about family and friendship, and and letting go of the past to move on with the future. And I think that's what a lot of us did. We haven't seen each other in a long time as a group, so to be together to watch this and to do a couple of things after that to celebrate Afterlife was wonderful. And that's what's really memorable. That's why it's so special to me, and that's why I think not only is it a good movie, because I'm a huge Ghostbuster fan, but just as a kid growing up and watching this now, it hits me the same notes. It's like it's, I don't know, the spirit of this movie never left me. So I really enjoyed it.
I
Chris,
think that's something you should like really enjoy about like something that you really love, and the more that you get to like experience those little things, it just makes you bond with something like that so much more. That's so sweet.
Definitely.
Chris, it makes my heart sing to know that everything that all of my preconceived notions from what I've gathered about the Ghostbusters community, and specific the Georgia Ghostbusters community, from doing different cons here and there in various different forms, that it seems like it is just as much fun and as inviting and um, everything else that you would kind of expect that group to be. Where you hear about um, other fandoms or whatever, where they kind of get caught up in their own, kind of nerdy uppityness. Is a
Right,
kind of
right.
is a good way to put it. The Ghostbusters fandom. I think I was recorded a panel with Chase Ambrose, who you mentioned earlier,
Yep.
um, and he was talking about how the requirements were just, you could show up with some cardboard strapped to your back and we'll give you a patch.
Yeah.
We want everyone in, because there's no point in us excluding anybody. If you like the movie and you want to be a part, you come on in, we'll do the thing, and we hang out. It's just it really makes me feel good to know that it is just that much fun and inviting.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one thing about the Ghostbuster fandom. I mean, you know, uh, there's no, like, maybe there's particular groups like in different states, they may have like a certain standard when it comes to like doing appearances and stuff. But overall, like, I've done the Dragon Con parade, and it's cool because people can bring their own creativeness to their suits, and it's welcome with open arms, unlike other franchises like Star Wars, because they're so focused on screen accuracy. And with Ghostbusters, it's not about screen accuracy, it's about just the fun of cosplaying, and just being among other people. And that's what I like about it. That's why I love doing like Dragon Con, or anytime I get a chance to suit up and just be among people that I love being around. It's always fun. Anytime we're like, hey, Ghostbusters in the park, if I'm able to do it, I'm 100% down. I'll fully suit up and I go out there, just because I get to connect with people, not only fellow busters but kids who are now experiencing the franchise, and their parents who have been watching it for years, and they may not seen that movie for a long time, but they know exactly what that suit means and what it looks like. So it's fun that as a franchise we can bring people along with us, and we can have fun together. We can talk Ghostbusters. You don't have to have a screen accurate suit. You don't have to be scheduled to appear. It's just when you get together, and it's really fun.
Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap up this episode, and let's move on to my favorite part of every week, and ask the question, what's made us happy this week? And Chris is our very special guest for this week. What, sir, have you done, or have you experienced, or just anything that's put you in a good mood this week?
Man, see, I was hoping you went first so I can go off your vibes, because that's I was asking what to say about this. But
Oh
okay,
no, Mark must go last.
Now, well, now listen. I can go in any order. I don't want to. I don't want to make it seem like, oh yes, you go first,
oh no,
because
no, you're
I
fine.
shall go
Okay,
last.
now I'm gonna take a shot. So the thing that I think that have makes me feel good this week, or got me feeling pretty good. Is just overall, I'm just humble to be where I am in my life. And what am I writing and what am I art? I got a family that loves me and supports me. I've got kids that are good kids, and also love the things I do. We get to go out and do Comic Cons together. I got a Comic Con coming up next week, and my son is going to help me, and my daughter likes to hang out with us. So, we do Dragon Con, we do all these things. So I'm very thankful that I have a family that's supportive of nerdy stuff. We like to do it. Like to hang out with us as well. My wife also supports it. She does crafts, so when she's crafting, she brings her stuff. I bring my books and my comics and all that jazz, and together we're good. And I'm glad to be where I am. Mentally, physically, financially. I'm just happy. I'm just humble, really.
I think that's
That's
probably the
so fun.
most kind of sincere answer we've had. So, Raven, what about you?
Your turn.
My turn. Um, I don't know. It's just been kind of like a nice little decent week. I've had a bunch of really nice clients this week at my grooming job. I don't always get that, which can be a bummer some weeks. But honestly, I think I just had like a fairly decent week. I had a great time last weekend coming home and seeing a bunch of my friends. So I think it just kind of like started a little wave effect of, oh, it's going to be a good week. I think that's all it for. That's
That
all
is.
that I got.
No,
Let's go back. Say grooming. Like what kind of grooming? Like dogs or
Oh, I
pets?
do dog grooming.
Oh man, see, I have guinea pigs. And I was like, if you're like closer to us in Warner Robins, I could really use somebody who can like clip my guinea pig's nails. Like my wife, like you said grooming, she's like, ask about the nails.
Oh, hey, we'll probably be coming up at some point to do, a super late Christmas over with Mark anyway. So
Okay,
I'll let you know when I
I,
come through.
yeah, we gotta talk about that when you guys are gonna come down.
True.
very cool.
We'll get to that later. But what
Yeah.
about you, Mark? What
Um,
you been doing that makes you happy?
you
Yeah,
know,
Mark.
I don't, man, I feel like mine feels a little bit conceited, uh, to people just generally being happy with life, which I am. But the thing that's made me happy this week is, for one, I'm back on my diet. The holidays have been the holidays to me, and I've eaten like a king for like the past 2 months, and it's been wonderful. But I have to get back off of that nonsense and get back, to eating healthy because, I still have a little bit ways to go with losing weight. And I decided that I wanted to start a YouTube/TikTok as a way to kind of chronological this process and record this process and kind of keep myself accountable. And so, yeah, I've found like this weird joy in doing like a daily TikTok is kind of like a weigh-in thing. Like, hey, I'm checking in, weighing in, and no one may see it. They may or may not see it. I don't know. Nor do I really care. But
Fair
it's
enough.
kind of like this way to keep myself accountable, um, and to kind of create something because I was kind of in this rut where I wanted to create something but didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And I still don't even know if this is it. But it gives me a little bit of a creative outlet to go and do something. I can take out my little phone and my little Steadicam gimbal thing and go and get some shots and give a little bit of commentary, and then I can just kind of veg out and sit in front of my computer and cut a video together. And I enjoy that. That brings me happiness.
That is amazing.
That's pretty fun. Also, it'll like, if you show it to your girls, you can be like, look, these are my healthy little habits that I'm doing, and you can see the process that it's gaining,
Mm-hmm.
Very true.
which would be good.
And my youngest just started CrossFit for kids, and she
Oh my
was
goodness.
and Chris, my youngest one, I always say that she has more energy than Jesus. She is fired up all the time. From the time she wakes up to the time her head hits the pillow, she has nonstop energy. So we had her in gymnastics for a while, and we didn't feel like she was getting what we figured she should be getting. And one of the local CrossFit places, we found that they had a kids class, and she was so nervous to start it. And I talked to her. I talked to her the next morning because I was out doing something that evening. And the next morning, I was like, well, tell me about CrossFit. And she was off to the races. Oh my God, Dad, you'll never believe what they made us do. We did this and we did this. And she was all about it. So,
That's awesome.
yeah, I'm super excited to see where this goes. It's a 4-month class, once a week for 4 months. So I'm looking forward to her getting them gains.
There you go.
So
Dang, she's gonna be the toughest kid in her class.
she already
Oh,
is
yeah.
the toughest kid in her class.
She'll be like,
Anyone that starts bullying some other kid, she's gonna be like, "What'd you say?" and just step up at him.
Well, I always said that I feel like I'm going to get the call to go to Amy's class, not because she was being because she was being an unintentional bully. Like,
Right.
because she's so competitive, she's going to be the one who walks up to little Timmy and goes, they're out playing kickball or something, and little Timmy's not pulling his weight with the kickball team, and she walks up and goes, "Hey, get your shit together." And I get a call going, well, she told little Timmy that he needs to get his shit together. And I'm going to be like, well, maybe little Timmy needs to get his shit together. So,
Right. Yeah, my daughter's pretty similar on the energy level. Like, she's hard to contain sometimes. So I feel like I need to throw her in CrossFit training.
So, Chris, why don't you tell people where they can find you and your work and just get in touch with you?
Okay, cool. So overall, I'm usually on Facebook. I'm venturing out for other social media and all that jazz, but usually you can find me facebook.com Chris Garret official. Is usually where I've been posting lately. I've gotten really good about posting pretty often. I had a big jump. I've been like floating around 270 followers for like almost like 5-6 years, and then as of like this past week, I went from like 278 to like 314.
Oh,
So
cool.
and every day I post, I'm getting like 6-7 likes, if not more. It doesn't sound like much, but considering for a long time I wasn't getting one. I was getting zero.
Yeah.
So it's nice. So Chris Garret official on Facebook. You can probably hashtag Chris Garret official. You can find me that way on most social media platforms, Instagram as well. Also, if you get a chance, check out The Mark. You can also find The Mark movie on Facebook. It's not available for streaming yet, but if you're in Georgia, they are showing the film in certain parts of Atlanta, and there is discussion over DVDs and stuff. So just stay in the loop for the movie that I was in for a whole probably 5 seconds. I did voiceover for that too. I forgot to tell you. I'm a heckler like through audio. I did like a whole audition for that too. So I've got 2 parts in the movie, funny enough. But the Mark movie, I believe you can search it for Facebook and keep up for updates and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, you can find me on Twitter and in just about all the social medias at Turtles Do It. Oh yeah, no, I still keep that moniker.
Oh, yeah.
I did.
Keep it alive.
I honestly I love that moniker so much that I had another Twitter handle and I was just like, man, I don't like it. So I had the old Turtles Do It account, and I was like, man, you know what? I think I'll just make this one my main one, and it's honestly a unique enough name. I know that no one else is gonna have it. So
And that's staying humble in my opinion, because you could have changed that 1,000 times as you're moving on with podcasting, but I think that's great that you still keep it.
Raven, where can they find you?
You can find me on the Instagrams over at That's So Raven Ellis, or the Twitters at spooky__Raven. You can also find us on the interwebs at Nerd for No Reason. I posted our first Instagram post this week. What's up, Mark?
Yeah, I know. I am terrible at social media.
Yeah.
And I say that as I'm like, oh, I'm doing a TikTok every day. I'm terrible at like posting to Twitter and Instagram and all that. Um, I'm just, I'm slowly but
That's
surely like falling out of social media, which is weird because I'm like podcast and promote and do all this stuff that requires like a social media presence.
Right.
Um,
I'm telling you, I was bad about it as well. But I think since I don't know, maybe October, I've gotten better at it because I always think, man, if I'm having a bad day at work, I just don't want to post anything. But I've gotten to where I post little things. It doesn't have to be anything big, but I see the results in it. I've gotten more people following, more people liking. I know it seems like it's impossible, especially when you're like me. We have a family, we have jobs, and it's really hard to sit down and take that second when you've got so much life going on around you. But trust me, man, if you keep at it, it will get better. I promise you. I thought the same thing. I was like, I'm never on here. I need to, but I don't have time. But I made time, and it actually works out.
cool. Yeah, yeah. We'll have to keep it up. I mean, it's just I think my biggest problem is that I try to make each thing its own kind of big event instead of just going, you know what? It can just be a quick little, hey, how you doing? It doesn't need to be, you know,
Exactly.
a big event style tweet or post or whatever. Um, I will
Don't
work.
worry, man. I'll hold down the Instagram.
All right.
I run 3 other Instagram accounts. I could take on another.
The thing is, you have to do the build up to the big event. That's the kicker. Just drop a couple.
True.
Oh, hey, I'm doing this soon, and then just next week, hey, I'm doing this soon, and then be like the week of, I'm doing this very soon, and then you do the thing. So every day, just every week, whatever you commit to, just go for it. Yeah, it doesn't have to be big.
Absolutely.
Just stay active on social media. That's the hardest part.
All right.
True.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks for listening. Chris, thank you so much for coming on our show. I hope you had a good time.
Man, thank you for having me. It feels like old times. So it hasn't been like 10 years or anything like that.
I mean, it's been a while.
I think last time we did a podcast was like 2017.
It was the Get Lit panel.
Yeah, like 2017 or 2018.
Yeah, and that was the first one I did in a long time.
Yeah,
so,
I remember.
So, all right. Well, everybody, thanks for listening. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure you hit us up on our socials and go and do something wonderful in the world today.
You guys go ingest all the medias, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye, everybody.